the choice that no one else understood. Some decisions make sense only to the person making them. From the outside, they look confusing, unnecessary, even wrong. This story begins with one such choice, a decision that defied logic, challenged expectations, and quietly altered the course of an entire career. For most of their life, they had done what was expected. They followed advice, chose stability, took paths that others recognized as smart and responsible. And for a long time, that worked. Their progress was visible, their choices explainable, their future easy for others to imagine. But today, in a world where personal alignment matters more than public approval, this story matters because it reveals the cost of living only by what makes sense to everyone else. The moment of choice arrived without drama. No crisis, no ultimatum. Just a realization forming slowly beneath the surface. They noticed how often their decisions were shaped by how they would be perceived. How frequently they asked, "Does this look right?" instead of, "Does this feel right?" That awareness unsettled them more than any external pressure ever had. The opportunity itself was modest, not prestigious, not obvious. It didn't fit the narrative others had written for them. In fact, it disrupted it. Friends questioned the move. Colleagues expressed polite concern. Some tried to talk them out of it entirely. From every external angle, the decision seemed unnecessary, but internally, the choice felt unmistakable. The path they were considering aligned with values they had ignored for too long. It offered growth without performance, learning without posturing, meaning without explanation. The problem wasn't the decision. It was that it couldn't be justified in language others expected. That disconnect created tension. Because choosing something you can't explain forces you to trust something deeper than logic, your own sense of direction. And trusting that when no one else does is one of the hardest things a person can do. Standing at that moment, they realize something profound. Sometimes the right choice isn't the one that makes sense. It's the one that makes you whole. The tension intensified as the reality of the decision set in. Explaining it to others felt harder than making it. Each conversation carried the same questions. Why now? Why this? What's the long-term plan? They offered careful answers, but none of them fully captured the truth. The real reason didn't translate well into logic. It lived somewhere deeper, beyond strategy and justification. Doubt crept in during these moments, not because the choice felt wrong, but because standing alone is exhausting. When no one else understands your direction, it's easy to wonder if you're missing something obvious. They replayed conversations in their mind, questioning whether they were being short-sighted or naive. The absence of external validation made the silence louder. Yet every time they imagined choosing differently, choosing what others expected, the same heaviness returned. The alternative felt like a betrayal of something essential. Staying on the familiar path would have been easier to explain, easier to defend, easier to accept, but it would have required shrinking part of themselves they had only just begun to recognize. The conflict deepened when they watched others continue forward on predictable paths. Promotions announced, milestones celebrated, clear narratives reinforced. The contrast was sharp. Their own choice looked quiet, ambiguous, even invisible by comparison. And for a moment, the urge to reverse course pressed hard against their resolve. But something unexpected happened in that discomfort. They noticed a sense of calm beneath the uncertainty. While the future was unclear, the present felt right. Their days carried a different weight, lighter, more intentional. They were learning again, stretching again, reconnecting with curiosity that had been muted for years. The lack of explanation didn't diminish the experience. It deepened it. Slowly, they began to understand why the choice felt so difficult to explain. It wasn't meant to be defended. It was meant to be lived. Some decisions don't seek approval. They seek alignment. And the more they honored that alignment, the less they needed others to understand it. The realization didn't erase doubt, but it changed its role. Doubt was no longer a warning to stop. It was simply the cost of choosing something true without consensus. And that cost, they were learning, was worth paying. As time passed, the weight of the choice settled into something more complex than fear or doubt. It became responsibility. Choosing a path no one else understood meant there was no one else to blame, No familiar script to follow if things went wrong. Every outcome would belong to them alone. And that realization intensified the internal conflict. Moments of uncertainty surfaced often. Late at night, during quiet stretches when progress felt invisible, they wondered if they were being patient or simply avoiding clarity, if they were trusting intuition or hiding from commitment. The absence of external markers made it difficult to measure success, and without those signals, doubt searched for new ground. The conflict reached its peak when an unexpected comparison arose. Someone close to them achieved a milestone that mirrored the path they had walked away from. Celebration followed. Validation was loud. The contrast was unavoidable. For a brief moment, the old logic returned, whispering that maybe the safe, explainable choice would have been easier after all. But in that moment, something else surfaced, something quieter but steadier. They noticed how differently they felt now, how engaged they were with their work, how present they felt in their days, how the questions they faced were no longer about status or approval, but about growth and direction. The life they were building didn't look impressive from the outside, but it felt real from inside. The emotional tension broke when they recognized a simple truth. The discomfort they felt wasn't a sign of failure. It was the friction of becoming someone new. Growth without permission is uncomfortable. Transformation without applause is lonely, but it is also honest. That realization shifted everything. The need to be understood began to fade. In its place grew a deeper trust. Trust in their ability to navigate uncertainty, to learn through experience, to define success on their own terms. The choice no one else understood no longer needed defense. It had already reshaped them in ways the old path never could. And in that quiet acceptance, the conflict gave way to resolve. With resolve came a subtle freedom they hadn't expected. The weight of explanation lifted. The constant need to justify each step began to dissolve. They no longer measured progress by how easily it could be described, but by how deeply it felt aligned. The choice that once isolated them now grounded them. Over time, the path they had chosen began to reveal its value, not through headlines or milestones, but through quiet transformation. Their skills sharpened in new ways. Their thinking deepened. Their confidence grew from experience rather than approval. They became more adaptable, more self-aware, more resilient than they had ever been on the predictable path they left behind. What surprised them most was how the world eventually responded. Not everyone understood the journey, but some did. New connections formed. People drawn not to status, but to clarity and authenticity. Opportunities emerged that never would have appeared if they had stayed where everything made sense. The invisible work they had been doing quietly became visible in ways they couldn't have planned. Looking back, they understood why the choice had been so hard to explain. It wasn't designed to impress. It was designed to transform. And transformation rarely follows a script that others recognize in advance. The decision that once felt lonely became the foundation of a life built on intention rather than expectation. A career shaped not by consensus, but by courage. And in that courage, they found something far more valuable than approval. They found direction. Sometimes the most important choices are the ones only you can understand. Sometimes the smallest shift in perspective becomes the beginning of a new future. The choice